The restaurant sat on the edge of Maple Falls, Vermont, a small tourist town where old money came to ski in winter and escape the city heat in summer. La Maison Elegante had earned its reputation through white tablecloths, imported wine, and the unspoken understanding that certain guests mattered more than others. The chandeliers cast soft golden light across the dining room, illuminating faces that belonged on magazine covers and bank statements with too many zeros to count. Crystal stemware caught the light and scattered it in tiny rainbows across the ceiling, and the soft murmur of polished conversation filled the air like expensive perfume. The waitstaff moved like ghosts between tables, speaking only when spoken to, existing in that strange liminal space between servant and furniture. Marcus Cole had worked there for 8 months. At 34, he carried himself with a quiet steadiness that made him easy to overlook. Brown hair cut short, clean-shaven, shoulders that seemed deliberately relaxed beneath his white server's jacket. He moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling water glasses and delivering plates with the kind of invisible competence that wealthy patrons expected but never acknowledged. To them, he was furniture that happened to bring food. He had learned to accept this invisibility, even to welcome it. In another life, invisibility had been a survival skill. Here, it was simply part of the job. Tonight was a Friday, which meant the dining room hummed with weekend travelers and locals celebrating something or nothing at all. The autumn air outside had turned crisp, and the restaurant's fireplace crackled with a carefully maintained flame that added to the ambiance without producing any real heat. Marcus had requested the late shift because it paid slightly better, and because it meant his daughter Lily could sit in the small alcove near the kitchen, doing her homework while she waited for him to finish. The staff knew her well by now. The line cooks slipped her extra bread rolls and sometimes a small bowl of ice cream when Marcus was not looking. The hostess let her use the colored pencils from the reservation desk. She had become something of a mascot. This quiet little girl with serious eyes who never complained about the late hours, who seemed to understand instinctively that her father was doing what needed to be done. She was 7 years old, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's watchful eyes. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, taken by a car accident on a rain-slicked highway that had left Marcus alone with a toddler and a grief so heavy he sometimes forgot how to breathe. He had rebuilt their life piece by piece, moving from state to state until they landed in Maple Falls, taking whatever work he could find that allowed him to be present for Lily. The restaurant job was temporary, like everything else, but it kept food on the table and a roof over their heads. It let him tuck her in at night and wake her up for school in the morning, and that was enough. The trouble started at table 12. Preston Whitmore III had arrived with an entourage of 4, including a young woman who sat beside him with the practiced stillness of someone accustomed to being ornamental. Her name was Claire Ashford, and she had been dating Preston for 3 months. Preston was 42 years old and had never worked a day in his life. His grandfather had built a real estate empire across New England. His father had expanded it into commercial development, and Preston had learned only how to spend what others had earned. He wore his wealth like armor, expecting the world to bend around his desires. By 9 o'clock, he had consumed most of a bottle of Chateau Margaux and was growing loud enough that neighboring tables had begun to shift uncomfortably in their seats. His voice carried across the dining room in waves, punctuated by braying laughter at his own jokes. Marcus approached with the second bottle Preston had ordered, moving with care around the crowded table. He had almost completed the pour when Preston suddenly gestured expansively, telling some story about a yacht race in Monaco. His elbow caught Marcus's arm at exactly the wrong angle. Red wine splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, and a few drops landed on Preston's Italian leather shoes. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but it stretched like something physical, filling the space between heartbeats. Preston looked down at his shoes, then up at Marcus. His face had gone red, but not from embarrassment. This was something older, something darker, something that had been waiting for permission to emerge. "You clumsy piece of trash," Preston said, his voice carrying across the dining room like a whip crack. "Do you have any idea what these shoes cost?" More than you make in a year, I'd wager. I apologize, sir. Let me get something to clean that immediately. Marcus kept his voice even, professional. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but Preston was already standing. Sorry? You think sorry covers it? People like you don't understand value. You don't understand anything except taking orders and screwing them up. Sir, I'll have the manager bring complimentary wine, and we'll take care of any cleaning costs for your shoes. Marcus remained still, his hands open and visible at his sides. In the alcove near the kitchen, he could see Lily looking up from her homework, her small face tight with confusion. That was when Preston's foot connected with Marcus's stomach. The kick drove the air from his lungs in a violent rush. He dropped to one knee, one hand catching himself against the polished hardwood floor. The dining room went absolutely silent, except for the soft clatter of a fork someone had dropped in shock. Somewhere, a woman gasped. Marcus looked up, not at Preston, but across the room at his daughter. Lily had stood up from her chair, her math worksheet falling forgotten to the floor. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted, and Marcus could see the exact moment when something in her understanding of the world cracked open like an egg. He wanted to tell her that everything was okay. Instead, he just met her eyes and tried to communicate something wordless, an apology that had nothing to do with being kicked and everything to do with her having to witness it. Stay there, sweetheart, he managed, his voice hoarse. Just stay there. Preston laughed, looking around at the frozen diners as if expecting applause. See that? That's how you handle the help. They need to learn their place. Claire Ashford had gone pale. She watched Marcus Cole rise slowly to his feet, and something about the way he moved made her breath catch in her throat. There was no scrambling, no fear in his posture. He stood the way a man stands when he is choosing not to do something. The restaurant manager, a thin man named Bernard, appeared with a tight smile. Sir, please, let me handle this. Marcus, perhaps you should take your break now. No, Preston said. I want him to apologize properly, on his knees, like the servant he is. Marcus looked at Preston Whitmore III, and for just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. It was not anger, exactly, and it was not fear. It was something much quieter, like the stillness that precedes a storm. He did not kneel. The dining room remained frozen for several long seconds after Preston's demand hung in the air. Forks hovered above plates, wine glasses remained suspended mid-sip. It was as if everyone present understood, on some primal level, that they had witnessed something shameful and that their silence had made them complicit. No one moved to help. No one spoke up. The collective cowardice of the room hung in the air like a bad smell. Preston seemed oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. He stood there waiting, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his face flushed with alcohol and self-righteousness. Around him, his companions avoided eye contact with anyone, including each other. Derek, his closest friend, had developed a sudden fascination with the tablecloth. The other guests in Preston's party were examining their phones as if they contained urgent messages. Bernard stepped forward again, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Mr. Whitmore, please, let me handle this situation. Whatever you need, we can discuss privately. The restaurant didn't spill wine on my shoes. He did. I want him on his knees, or I'll have this place shut down by the end of the month. My family owns half the commercial real estate in this county. One phone call? Bernard, that's all it would take. Claire had not moved from her seat. She sat perfectly still, watching the scene with growing horror. She had seen Preston's temper before, had witnessed his casual cruelty toward waitstaff and valets and anyone he considered beneath him. But this was different. This was public humiliation as performance art, and she was complicit simply by being there, simply by wearing the diamond earrings he had given her, simply by not walking away. She looked at Marcus Cole, standing there with wine stains on his jacket and what would surely become a bruise forming beneath his shirt. His breathing had steadied, his hands hung loose at his sides, and his eyes held something that made her deeply uneasy. She had seen angry men before, She had seen frightened men, but whatever was behind Marcus Cole's eyes was neither of those things. "I apologize for the wine, sir," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent dining room. "But I won't be kneeling." The words were simple, delivered without aggression or defiance. They were simply a statement of fact. Preston's face contorted. "What did you say to me?" "I said I won't be kneeling. Not for you. Not for anyone. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I could destroy you." Marcus did not respond. Instead, he turned and walked toward the alcove where Lily stood trembling. He gathered her into his arms with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything that had just happened, collected her backpack and homework, and carried her toward the employee exit. "Don't you walk away from me," Preston shouted. Marcus kept walking. Claire watched them go, and she could not shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something far more complicated than a waiter being humiliated. The way Marcus had moved, the absolute control in his voice, despite what had just happened. These were not the reactions of a man who had been defeated. These were the reactions of a man who had chosen not to fight. A woman at the next table, silver-haired and elegant, caught Claire's eye. She gave the slightest shake of her head before returning to her soup. The gesture spoke volumes about what she thought of Preston, of Claire, of everyone who had watched and done nothing. The parking lot behind La Maison Elegante was mostly empty, lit by a single flickering street lamp that cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Marcus set Lily down and took her hand, walking toward the old pickup truck that had been Sarah's before it became his. The night air was cold, and he could see his breath misting in front of him. Lily had stopped crying, but her grip on his hand was fierce, desperate. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice small in the darkness. "Did you do something wrong?" The question hit him harder than Preston's kick. He knelt down so he could see her face in the dim light, brushing a strand of hair away from her wet cheek. "No, sweetheart. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why did that man hurt you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the lies he could tell to make the world seem fairer than it was. Sometimes people with a lot of money think that gives them the right to treat others badly. It doesn't. But some of them believe it anyway. "Why didn't you hit him back?" "Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight." Hitting that man would have felt good for about 3 seconds, but then the police would have come, and I might have gone to jail, and you would have been alone. Some things matter more than making someone pay for being cruel. "So you were being strong by not hitting?" "That's right. But it looked like you weren't strong. It looked like he won." Marcus pulled her close, pressing his lips to the top of her head. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and the chicken nuggets she had eaten for dinner. "I know, sweetheart. I know it looked that way, Mr. Cole." The voice came from behind him. He turned, positioning Lily slightly behind his leg, and saw Claire Ashford standing near the restaurant's back door. She had thrown a coat over her dress and was holding something in her hands. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said evenly. "No, I know. I just thought you might need these. For your daughter. In case she needs to wipe her face." She held up a small first aid kit and a clean handkerchief. Marcus studied her for a moment. She was younger than he had initially thought, mid-20s perhaps, with nervous energy that suggested she was not comfortable with the life she was living. "Thank you. What he did was wrong. I want you to know that not everyone thought it was okay, and yet no one stopped him." She flinched, but did not argue. "No, we didn't." Marcus helped Lily into the truck, then turned back to Claire. "You should go back inside. Your boyfriend will be wondering where you are. Can I ask you something?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You were trained, weren't you? Military, or something like it. I saw the way you stood, the way you moved when you got back up." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he looked at his daughter through the truck window. "I made a promise," he said quietly. "A long time ago. I promised I would never use what I learned in front of her. Tonight almost broke that promise. Why not defend yourself?" Marcus met her eyes. "Because if I had defended myself, your boyfriend would be in a hospital right now. Or worse." And my daughter would have watched her father become something I swore I would never be again. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. Claire stood in the cold for a long time after his taillights disappeared, wondering what kind of man chose humiliation over violence when violence was clearly within his reach. The next morning, Bernard's call came at 8 o'clock. Given the circumstances, we feel it's best for everyone if we part ways. You'll receive your final paycheck by mail, along with a small severance. I'm sorry, Marcus. You were a good employee. But, Mr. Whitmore has made it clear that he'll make trouble for us if you stay. Marcus thanked him politely and ended the call. He had lost jobs before. This was not the catastrophe it might have been for someone else, but it meant starting over in a town where everyone would soon know what happened at La Maison Elegante. It meant explaining to Lily why they might need to move again, why her father could not seem to hold on to a job, why some people thought they could treat others like dirt just because they had money. Lily appeared in the doorway of their small apartment, still in her pajamas. Daddy? Was that about the restaurant? Yes, sweetheart. I won't be working there anymore. Because of the mean man? Yes. She crossed the room and climbed into his lap, wrapping her thin arms around his neck. I'm sorry, Daddy. It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. I know. But I'm still sorry. They sat together in the gray morning light. And Marcus wondered, not for the first time, how his daughter had become so wise, so young. She had her mother's capacity for empathy, her ability to sense when something was wrong and to offer comfort without being asked. It was both a blessing and a burden. That sensitivity. He hoped the world would not crush it out of her. Over the following days, Claire found herself thinking about Marcus Cole more often than she wanted to admit. She invented reasons to drive past the apartment complex where she had heard he lived, slowing down as if looking for a parking spot. Though she never stopped. She asked careful questions around town, pretending casual curiosity. Learning that he had moved to Maple Falls about 8 months ago, that he kept to himself, that his daughter was enrolled in the local elementary school and was reportedly a sweet, quiet child who always did her homework. No one knew where he had come from. No one knew what he had done before arriving in Vermont. But several people mentioned he was quiet, polite, and that he always walked with his eyes scanning his surroundings, like a man perpetually assessing threats that ordinary people could not see. One shopkeeper mentioned that Marcus had once stopped a shoplifter without raising his voice, simply by placing himself in the man's path and waiting. The shoplifter had taken one look at him and put the merchandise back. Preston, meanwhile, had been dining out on the story. He told it at dinner parties and cocktail hours, each retelling more embellished than the last. The waiter had been aggressive, he claimed. The waiter had made threatening comments. Preston had simply defended himself, put the man in his place, demonstrated the natural hierarchy of the world. You should have seen him grovel, Preston told friends one evening, swirling his whiskey, down on one knee, begging for mercy. These people need to understand, they exist to serve. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Claire sat nearby, her wine turning sour in her mouth. She remembered the parking lot, the quiet certainty in Marcus's voice. Your boyfriend would be in a hospital right now. Or worse. Preston had no idea how close he had come to something far worse than a wine stain on his shoes. She watched and said nothing, and felt something inside her slowly turning to stone. 3 months with Preston had shown her who he really was. But she had stayed anyway, telling herself that everyone had flaws, that the good outweighed the bad, that she was lucky to have found someone wealthy enough to take care of her. Now those justifications rang hollow in her ears. She searched for Marcus online and found nothing. No social media, no LinkedIn profile, no news articles, positive or negative. The man was practically a ghost. This absence was itself information. People did not disappear from the digital world by accident. They disappeared because they had something to hide, or because they had deliberately built a life away from scrutiny. Either way, it told Claire that Marcus Cole was not simply a waiter who had fallen on hard times. He was something else entirely. It was a Tuesday afternoon, almost a week after the incident, when Claire saw Marcus again. She had been driving through the older part of town, past the community center and the small park where children played on rusting equipment. She was not looking for him, she told herself. She had simply taken a different route to avoid the traffic on Main Street. But there he was, standing in the grass with Lily, showing her something that made Claire slow her car to a stop. He was teaching his daughter to stand. That was the only way she could describe it. He would position Lily's feet a certain way, adjust her shoulders, guide her hands into a relaxed but ready position. Then he would step back and circle her slowly, making small corrections, murmuring instructions too quiet for Claire to hear through the car window. Lily listened with intense concentration, her small face serious as she tried to mimic her father's posture. The movements were subtle, almost invisible to anyone who did not know what they were watching. But Claire had dated a man once who fancied himself a martial artist, had accompanied him to enough classes to recognize genuine expertise when she saw it. This was not a father playing with his daughter. This was a trained fighter passing down fundamental skills with precision that came only from years of serious practice. The way Marcus moved, the economy of motion, the complete absence of wasted energy. Everything about him spoke of training so ingrained it had become instinct. As she watched, an older man approached Marcus. He was perhaps 60, with a weathered face and military haircut gone silver. He wore a canvas jacket and work boots, and he walked with the measured gait of someone who had spent years carrying heavy packs across difficult terrain. He stopped a few feet away and said something to Marcus, who went very still. Claire could not hear their conversation, but she could read their body language. The older man stood with his weight balanced, his hands loose at his sides, in almost exactly the same posture Marcus had demonstrated to Lily. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had suspected. Marcus's shoulders relaxed fractionally, the tension draining out of him in a way Claire had never seen before. This was recognition. This was one professional acknowledging another. The older man watched Lily for a moment, then said something that made Marcus almost smile. It was the first time Claire had seen anything close to a smile on his face. Then the older man walked away, and Marcus returned his attention to his daughter, adjusting her stance one more time before scooping her up and carrying her toward the playground. Claire finally pulled her car forward and continued on her route. But she could not stop thinking about what she had seen. The silent communication between two men who clearly shared some kind of history, the careful precision with which Marcus taught his daughter to stand, to balance, to prepare for movement without telegraphing intent. That night, she searched differently, not for Marcus Cole, but for military units, for special operations training, for the kinds of programs that produced men who could remain utterly calm while being assaulted, who could disable two attackers in 3 seconds, who chose not to fight when fighting would have been easy. She did not find Marcus, but she found enough to understand that such men existed, that they walked through the world mostly invisible, carrying skills most people could not imagine, and that crossing one of them was potentially the most dangerous thing a person could do. Preston had no idea what he had kicked. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at La Maison Elegante. Marcus had found temporary work at a hardware store on the other side of town. The owner, Tom, was a gruff Vietnam veteran who did not ask questions. Lily had started sleeping through the night again. He was walking with her through the town's small farmers market on a Saturday morning when he saw Preston Whitmore for the second time. Preston was drunk at 11 in the morning, loudly complaining about local wines, while a woman who was not Claire stood beside him. Marcus immediately changed direction, guiding Lily toward a booth on the far side of the market. He had no desire for confrontation, but Preston had already spotted him. Well, look who it is. The clumsy waiter. Marcus kept walking, his hand firm on Lily's shoulder. Hey, I'm talking to you. Daddy, Lily whispered, her fingers tightening around his. Just keep walking, sweetheart. Don't look at him. But Preston was already moving, inserting himself directly in their path. I heard they fired you. Good. People like you need to learn consequences. Please step aside. My daughter doesn't need to see this. Your daughter needs to learn what her father really is. A nobody. A servant who doesn't know his place. Marcus felt Lily press closer to his leg. Around them, market-goers had stopped to watch. I'm asking you politely. Step aside. Preston laughed. Or what? You'll spill wine on me again? He took a step closer and reached out, putting his hand on Lily's head, ruffling her hair with mock affection. Cute kid. Does she know her daddy's a coward? Marcus moved. It was not dramatic. He simply shifted his weight, caught Preston's wrist, and redirected it away from his daughter. The motion was so smooth that observers would later struggle to describe what happened. Don't touch her. 3 words. No raised voice. But something in Marcus's tone made Preston's smirk falter. For the first time, he seemed to register that the man in front of him was not afraid. Let go of me, Preston demanded, trying to pull his wrist free. He could not. Marcus's grip looked casual, but Preston might as well have been trying to escape from steel. I will let go when you walk away. We are done here. Do you understand? You can't talk to me like that. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are. You are a man who has never faced consequences in his life. But I am telling you now, clearly, so there is no misunderstanding. If you touch my daughter again, or if you come near either of us again, I will respond. And you will not enjoy my response. He released Preston's wrist with a small push that sent the man stumbling backward. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for everything you have. You'll do what you need to do. Now leave. The crowd was watching. This was not a private dining room. This was a public space filled with phones and witnesses. This isn't over, Preston said finally, pointing a finger at Marcus. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. Marcus took Lily's hand and walked past Preston without looking back. Daddy, Lily said when they were in the truck. You scared him. I didn't mean to scare anyone, sweetheart. No, I mean, you made him small, just by talking. Marcus started the engine. Sometimes words are stronger than fists, remember that. But even as he said it, he knew that words had bought him time, nothing more. Preston Whitmore was not the kind of man who accepted humiliation gracefully. 3 nights later, Preston Whitmore found Marcus at Callahan's, the only bar in Maple Falls that stayed open past midnight. Marcus had stopped in after his shift at the hardware store, wanting nothing more than a single beer and 30 minutes of silence. He was sitting alone at the end of the bar when the door opened and Preston walked in, flanked by 2 men Marcus had never seen before. They were large, thick-necked, with the deliberate movements of hired muscle rather than casual friends. The bartender, Ruth, looked up with a frown. Kitchen's closed, gentlemen. Not here to eat. Preston's eyes found Marcus, and a cruel smile spread across his face. There he is, the tough guy from the market. Marcus set down his beer slowly. He could feel his training taking over. Cataloging exits, measuring distances, assessing threats. The 2 men with Preston were not professionals. Their stance was wrong, their hands were positioned badly, but they were still 2 against 1. You embarrassed me in front of half the town, Preston said, walking closer. Made me look weak. I don't let that stand. You should go home, Mr. Whitmore. You're drunk, and you're making a mistake. See, that's your problem. You think you can talk to me like we're equals. We're not. I'm going to teach you that lesson tonight. The 2 men moved to flank Marcus, 1 on each side. Ruth backed away from the bar, her hand moving toward the phone. Don't, Preston said sharply. This is a private matter. Marcus stood up from his stool. He did it slowly, without sudden movements, giving everyone time to see that his hands were empty and relaxed at his sides. Last chance, he said. Walk away. Preston laughed and nodded to his men. They moved simultaneously, the one on the left reaching for Marcus's arm, while the one on the right cocked back a fist. It was a clumsy, telegraphed attack. Marcus was not an ordinary person. He shifted his weight, ducked under the incoming punch, and caught the reaching arm. A twist, a pivot, and the first man was airborne. crashing into his partner with enough force to send them both sprawling. Before either could recover, Marcus stepped forward, delivered 2 precise strikes to pressure points, and both men went limp. The entire exchange took less than 3 seconds. Preston had stumbled backward, his face gone white. He stared at his hired muscle, both now groaning on the barroom floor, and then at Marcus, who had not even broken a sweat. What? What are you? Marcus did not answer. He simply stood there, his breathing unchanged, his posture still relaxed. Ruth stood frozen behind the bar, her mouth hanging open. I warned you, Marcus said quietly. At the restaurant, at the market, just now. You refused to listen. Preston's hand was shaking as he reached for his phone. I'm calling the police. You assaulted my employees. Your employees attacked me first. Ruth saw everything. The security camera recorded everything. How do you think that story plays? Preston's hand froze. Go home, Mr. Whitmore. Sleep it off. In the morning, you can decide whether you want to tell everyone in town that you hired goons to attack a single father and lost. Or you can pretend this never happened. Preston shoved his phone back in his pocket, glared at Marcus with impotent fury, and stormed out of the bar. His men limped after him. Ruth let out a long breath. What in the holy hell was that? Marcus picked up his beer, took a final sip, and set a $20 bill on the bar. Sorry for the disturbance. Keep the change. He walked out into the night, and Ruth spent the next hour telling everyone who would listen about the quiet man who had dismantled 2 fighters without apparent effort. Claire heard about it from Derek the next day. The official story was that Marcus had attacked unprovoked. But Claire also heard the other version spreading through town from Ruth. She tracked down Ruth at the bar. You were there? Ruth told her everything. The ambush. The warning. The 3 seconds of controlled violence that ended the fight before it truly began. I've been bartending 30 years, Ruth said. What that man did wasn't brawling. It was military training. Serious military training. He could have killed those 2 if he wanted. Instead, he put them down as gently as possible. Claire found Marcus at his apartment that afternoon, playing cards with Lily at a small kitchen table. I wanted to warn you, she said after he stepped outside. Preston's telling everyone you attacked him unprovoked. He's talking about pressing charges. I've dealt with worse threats. He's not going to let this go. I know. Claire hesitated. Who are you? Really? I was a soldier. A long time ago. I did things that needed doing. In places most people will never hear about. When my wife got sick, I got out. I promised her I would be a different kind of man for our daughter. But you still have the training. The training never leaves. It becomes part of how you move, how you think. The difference is choosing when to use it. And at the bar, I had no choice. Those men were going to hurt me. I controlled the situation with minimum force. No one was seriously injured. Claire shook her head. Minimum force. You put 2 men on the ground in 3 seconds. They got up. They walked out. In my previous life, that would not have been the outcome. He met her eyes. I'm not a violent man anymore, but I am still capable of violence when it's the only option. Preston needs to understand that the next time he comes at me, I may not be able to hold back. I think I can help. I have access to information about Preston, things he wouldn't want public. Why would you help me? Watching you choose not to fight at the restaurant changed something in me. I don't want to stay silent anymore. The police came to interview Marcus, but their questions were perfunctory. Preston's men gave conflicting statements. Ruth's account showed self-defense, and the security footage removed doubt. No charges were filed. Over the following weeks, Claire quietly gathered evidence. Financial records showing Preston's creative interpretation of tax laws. Testimonies from former employees describing harassment. She fed it carefully to a journalist she had known in college. Meanwhile, the town had begun treating Marcus differently. Where before he had been invisible, just another face in the crowd, now people noticed him. They nodded when he passed on the sidewalk. They struck up conversations at the hardware store, asking about Lily, about how he was settling in, about whether he needed anything. The story of what had happened at Callahan's had spread through Maple Falls like wildfire, and the consensus was clear. Marcus Cole was not a man to be trifled with, but he was also not a man to be feared. He was simply a man who had done what needed to be done, and nothing more. Tom, the hardware store owner, a gruff Vietnam veteran who had seen his share of combat, doubled Marcus's hours without being asked and gave him a raise. "Man like you deserves honest work," Tom said simply one morning as he handed Marcus a new set of keys to the store. "I don't know what you did before, and I don't need to know, but I know quality when I see it." 3 weeks after the bar fight, the exposure piece dropped in a major national magazine, complete with documentation of Preston's improprieties and testimonies from a dozen people who had experienced his cruelty firsthand. The article detailed years of financial manipulation, employee harassment, and the casual cruelty that Preston had inflicted on anyone he considered beneath him. Within hours, it went viral. Preston's family issued a terse statement distancing themselves from his behavior and announcing that he had been removed from all company positions. His social circle evaporated overnight, fair-weather friends suddenly discovering urgent business elsewhere. The district attorney, sensing political opportunity, announced an investigation into possible criminal charges. Preston Whitmore III had been brought down not by violence, but by the quiet accumulation of truth. The kick he had delivered in La Maison Elegante had set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately destroy everything he thought he owned. That evening, Marcus and Lily walked to the park, where he had taught her to stand properly. The days were growing shorter, and the light had turned golden. "Daddy?" Lily asked as they sat on a bench, watching other children play. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you still strong?" He thought about the bar fight, about the control it had taken to stop at merely disabling rather than destroying. "Strong enough to choose peace," he said finally. "That's all the strength that matters." Lily leaned against him, her small hand finding his. "I think you're the strongest daddy in the whole world." Marcus smiled and pulled her close. The next day, Claire found Marcus at the hardware store. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said. "I'm leaving Maple Falls. Going back to Boston, where I have friends who actually care about me." "That sounds like a good decision. I also wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what real strength looks like. For not fighting back that night at the restaurant when everyone would have understood if you had. For teaching me that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing." "I didn't do anything special, Claire. I just tried to be the kind of man my daughter could be proud of. That's exactly what made it special." She hugged him quickly, then stepped back. "Take care of yourself, Marcus. And take care of that little girl. Always." 6 months later, Marcus Cole had become a fixture in Maple Falls. Tom had promoted him to assistant manager at the hardware store, recognizing both his work ethic and his gift for dealing with difficult customers. He had a way of calming angry people, of making them feel heard without ever raising his voice, that Tom said was worth more than any degree. Lily had made friends at school and no longer flinched when loud men raised their voices. She had joined a soccer team and was learning to play piano from an elderly woman down the street who refused to accept payment. The apartment had accumulated photographs on the walls, drawings on the refrigerator. Small touches of permanence that Marcus had once thought he would never allow himself. This was home now. This was where they belonged. Preston Whitmore had been indicted on multiple counts of tax fraud and witness intimidation. His family had cut him off financially. And the last Marcus heard, Preston was living in a rented apartment in Albany while awaiting trial. The incident at La Maison Elegante was never mentioned in the official proceedings, but everyone in Maple Falls knew it was where his downfall had truly begun. The kick that was supposed to demonstrate Preston's power had instead revealed his weakness, and the world had responded accordingly. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Marcus and Lily walked into a new restaurant that had opened on Main Street. It was smaller than La Maison Elegante, more casual, the kind of place where families came for pancakes and nobody cared about the labels on your clothes or the price of your shoes. The walls were decorated with local artwork, and the smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. The hostess smiled at them warmly. "2 for breakfast? Please." She led them to a booth by the window, and Lily immediately claimed the side that faced the door. She had picked up that habit from her father without either of them ever discussing it. Some lessons were taught without words. Lily ordered chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream. Marcus ordered eggs and toast and a large cup of black coffee. He watched her cut her pancakes into precise squares before eating them one by one, her small face serious with concentration. "Daddy?" she said between bites. "Yes? I think we're going to be okay." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Outside the window, Maple Falls was waking up to a beautiful spring morning. People walked their dogs along the tree-lined streets. Shop owners swept their sidewalks and exchanged waves with passing neighbors. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, calling the faithful to worship. It was an ordinary morning in an ordinary town, and that ordinariness felt like the greatest gift Marcus had ever received. "I think so too, sweetheart." They finished their breakfast slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere else. When they finally left, Marcus held the door for an elderly couple coming in, who thanked him with genuine smiles. The morning sun was warm on their faces as they walked down Main Street, father and daughter, heads held high, belonging to this place in a way they never had before. No one stared, no one whispered, no one treated them as less than anyone else, and in that ordinary moment, surrounded by the simple dignity of a life rebuilt from the ashes of grief and violence, Marcus Cole understood something profound. True power did not announce itself. It did not need witnesses or validation or the submission of lesser men. It simply existed, quiet and certain, waiting to be called upon only when all other options had been exhausted. It was the power to choose peace when war would have been easier. It was the power to walk away when walking away looked like weakness. It was the power to protect without destroying, to defend without attacking, to win without fighting. And when that power was finally revealed, it did not shout or celebrate or demand acknowledgement. It simply silenced the room and let the silence speak for itself.